Radio Mane, Radio Mane, Badion Savion Babalakope.
Gilg Jew, Gilg J as Gilg Nerach.
William Shiwashaldachus, Claare na Gael. My name is Robert Cutting Carswell, or Robert a Carslach.
Old Bobby Bob.
And in Claare na Gael, I'll be presenting part of it in the English language, as Nim Chepel per Delia G Sachilg, and I'll be presenting another part of it in the Manx Gaelic. Chinyanamera, the mother tongue of Alan Vanning, the Isle of Man. As Banach and Jurish. With the death of Magnus, the last of the dynasty of Godred Crovan, in 1265, the Isle of Man came under King Alexander III of Scotland, and the island suffered under those appointed as bailiffs or governors of the island. But then the powerful Alexander III died. Ons yn tai Lucy Westenra richt yn olwban Helsing goelmach as y ffogl iawr lierege, jarn te as pert de her chuj lai, lostan ul beg as de chainel, de skin of regi, kivin tri trier lurid lesh ring keel, as ord trom. We begin with ELIN Edwards, a multi-instrumentalist and singer who performs under the name THALLO, which is the name of the Greek goddess of spring buds and green shoots. Tashu geisjachrish radio vanning, stashu na nashun, skeliamach waidulish, ELIN vanning.
Sin Pluo ddwch, fel diwrnod i ddiwedd, fel diwrnod i ddiwedd, yn dal i ddod. Dream
And that's Welsh artist THALLO, ELIN Edwards, singing a song called Pluo, which is Welsh for feathering, a song referring in fact to her physical condition, for a time barely able to move, gathering dust, as she said, like feathering stillness. In a review of the Manx History, David Robertson describes the troubled times under Scottish rule, but after the death of Alexander III says, "The Scottish monarchy preserved her conquest of the Hebrides, but the Isle of Man was, after various contests, finally wrested from her by the English arms. Sir William Montacute," that's given as Sir William de Montacute, and also as Montague you find it, Sir William de Montacute, an affable and generous hero who had married a descendant of Godred Crovan, being furnished by Edward III with an army and navy to prosecute his lady's right, soon reduced the island, and by command of the English monarch in 1344 was crowned King of Man. Now, the exact connection of Sir William de Montacute's wife, Catherine Grandison, with the dynasty of Godred Crovan, I think it remains obscure, apparently through a lady called Africa, but that name appears more than once in the chronicles and not necessarily directly in the history of the dynasty of Godred Crovan. Well, Seo chas Gael an early John Seward. Dus, ta sesen fairly the Erlus on over je sorcher be, greinige as cor brie. Ach, vereirtes na ridden shen Arthur, gammes Quincy, de chor oru sors de vorre. Ach, ren en jist jou frail soesig chriach och, as renne tannachten gen vogel as kuun. Treve de chulju rid Erlu, dort van Helsing. Rosh me wischen jinu weg, lig dau instu shaw. She as insach as kiel chonit en chandiach, as jaus nolju ten jinu studeris purigen en jou verju. Tret a chitte wemer so, ta chit lesje gachlei mi war wenes kuste. Gen noddad gedden bes, ach sein dau tannachten, eish, les crew draaien no, as bisjige ilke teel. Son odsen olju vis gedden bes vai kragen en jou verju, totsen hien chitte wein jou verju, as krage rernen duches. As me so, ten kjakel freelrish skelia maag de breg, gurisje ribble vai klaag kjoutstjaags en ostje. Now this is a well-known Scottish Gaelic song, sung by two iconic names in traditional music in the Isle of Barra, CALUM Johnson and Flora MacNeill, who sing about Mhic Iarla nam bratach bana, son of the Earl of the White Banners.
Mhic Iarla nam bratach bana,
Mhic Iarla nam bratach bana,
Mhic Iarla nam bratach bana, chona mi to longer sale.
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro, llorama huele.
chona mi to longer sale,
Komme mi te longer sale,
chona mi to longer sale, was you your stach from lekich.
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro, llorama huele.
was you your stach from lekich.
Vast du da der stachram rekit,
Mas you your stach from lekich, skoefelt de hieten en kalavin.
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro, llorama huele.
skoefelt de hieten en kalavin.
Koeplet de hietene kalavins,
Skoefelt de hieten en kalavin, gapaun en glasse gova.
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro, llorama huele.
gapaun en glasse gova.
Apaan ang lase huve,
Gapaun en glasse gova, na doen we geen spikon lara.
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro,
ELIN beko lloro, llorama huele.
na Nandun vegan spek on Lara.
Na dun vegan spekulare.
Nandun vegan spek on Lara. Nandun tulumnen bratach bana.
Ilen beko loro.
Hilen beko loro.
Ilen beko loro Iarla hoile.
Flora MacNeill and CALUM JOHNSON from Barra, singing about the son of the Earl of the White Banners, Mhic Iarla and bratach bana. Mhic Arthur. De bergu vi jail feg shen, as de fised dori, rosh me ben Lucy roch gedden bes. Nunnis, rair treren u scale macht de reichen a son. Vegu, Lord Tamult, tre vegu en gedden bes, jit de vei Nosferatu, mat had greirus en Europa jaar, as vegu en jenu ulju en tre, tolju jena njau verju shen, tak orin huiskach. Koers ven bien gon jou vanre shaw, genelle ich een oil toyacht. Genel na pechen shen jousen die jole fool, fors forden a smedder. Ach, ma bissi tannachten bio, as ish njau varu. Na smooth tat call of hoolok, as ljorische purek oru tat chithook, as me saw ti tarn mache foolok les je wiel shen choolk. As me vissi gedden beste firnjach, ach, me vissi gedden beste firnjach, esh ta shaw ulju chit gekjaun. Tan a lodden beggers a scornach, ljai soel, as tat gol back de chlai, Guinness na vaughan. Now, the village of Ballabeg in Arbury first grew up around the site of a 13th century Franciscan friary called Bimmerton, the only Franciscan church in the island. Well, Bimmerton Friary was the result of a successful petition by Sir William de Montacute to Pope Urban V, who gave permission for what is described as a church or oratory with bell tower, bell, cemetery, houses and other necessary offices for a community of 12 friars. Apparently they came to the island from Ireland rather than from England. However, the friary wasn't built until about 30 years after Sir William de Montacute's death, and the only remains can be seen in what's now used as a barn at the friary, the farm called the Friary, and the late Noel Kringle showed members of the Celtic Congress round it a few years ago. But of course the name of that farm, the Friary, and where a housing estate was built on some of the farmland, and that estate's known as Friary Park, well, that shows the connection of Sir William de Montacute's petition to the Pope on that area. And from an album released at the start of this year, that was Breton band FORZH PENAOS, twice visitors to Macruniach and itching to come again. Music for a pash pea it was, called Doub'Doub, and in brackets after that, beer time! ! More from that album later on.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwn, ta radio fanning. Nas yn sio se Claare na Gael vis reclashen, mer yn peen Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Have I heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
Te Claare na Gael master na gieden de podcasten bis vergeten nasty, as voor die shoe korsjacht de getten had, trued in de degge radio banning heen. Daarbij keerde er een podcast elien, maar wist radio na maastok, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, na Alexa. In 1337, when Edward III awarded the kingship of Man to Sir William de Montacute, Montacute was limited by his ongoing service for Edward III in continental Europe. A further difficulty was that he was responsible for managing King Edward III's debts in the cost of the wars, and Robertson reports. Montacute didn't long retain this honour. His pecuniary exigencies compelled him to mortgage his kingdom to Anthony Beck, Bishop of Durham, a subtle and avaricious bigot. Yes, but now Anthony Beck had actually died in 1311 when William de Montacute would have been only 10 years of age. Now Beck was a warrior bishop in service to Edward I. Robertson then goes on to say that Anthony Beck soon after obtained a grant of the island from Richard II. But Richard II didn't come to the throne until 1377. But, says Robertson, on this prelate's decease the kingdom of Man returned to Montacute, now created Earl of Salisbury. So I'm afraid the timelines that Robertson has got here are just completely out. Ach smú bannet jerskin ulju, tret and fair to nish niau varu, ve courage the royal fame or maru the fear. Esh be annam a veneg wach, ori tashnulju graiach, se rish. Onsinne jage in the wolks on thee, as chit de ve smoomu ginach, ons goilori shen sole, ni ish goilen inidek, master na einl elia. Masaw machara. Be lau vanit I son ni corabulje vis liga seri. De yunum shen, ta Mhic Iarla. Ach, na wel fair na maastein, as de care share egge. Na be a jaunus de smunnion lug shaw, ons tasted na he, tre na wel sabi noord. Emmes van lau ren cori gus na rolegen. An lau eggesen as va grai smoo egge ori. An lau jaus nulju, ver ish heen rai. De becher weer a sonder rai. Instau me vis vergein lit na maastein. Ich ulju Arthur. Ren eschen tegel nis, de rensjen ulju, a kindjelus ersken kunter ren korlige de lisach en lau eggesen a ve shen, jinnach kor Lucy Ashton, maar kunjach den kajerik, as gene me kajerik. Now, Culture Vanning holds regular brie sessions to promote Manx traditional music amongst young musicians, and SCRAN is the name given to a grouping who are encouraged to experiment and explore. And this is part of an arrangement from an album just newly released. It's called SCRAN Geese, and it features a vocal on this track by MAEVE CALLISTER.
Last
MAEVE CALLISTER singing Ren Ben Biawn, Curdavania, and the members of SCRAN wove that round with a Welsh tune, although that's called Polka Frengig, French polka, and that's just part of a longer arrangement, in fact. Gawic hesmod der rai as dwrteid o dunnel, ged raw a law ege a craw, as der raw an edin ege cho ben a sniachta. Mych ar a fyr, fai bun a chri brishem, tam I cor bwystod. Inch down of his orm junno as cha jinnam tujum. Hug van Helsing law a ghilen as dwrte, my gilja braw. Tullach de gonneles as te jint. Signed and chibbin shaw, they sight the truge. Be pianton as aglach na be bonnet mich on shen. Ach beer, ach ristreg yer, as neo esh goil bogan the smoon of a muds a fianed. Assen time meriu gromach shaw, neo chit mach mor de bew shul san air. Ach an aiden do tujum, tret au kaart en all toyacht. Smunny air, ach de wel shingen, de churgen fear, me giertemoed, as de wel shingen goil paja de han nolju en drei. Imi rod, doet altijd de vier genach, in stouw me visri in the Now, David Robertson is right that Sir William de Montacute was created the first Earl of Salisbury by Edward III, and that was in 1337. But Robertson says that shortly after being restored to the kingship of Man, Montacute soon after sold it to Sir William Scroop, Chamberlain to the king. Now this would perhaps have been William de Montacute the son, born 1328, because William de Montacute the father, the first Earl of Salisbury, died in 1344, and Sir William Scroop wasn't born until 1350. But, says Robertson, describing him, Scroop was an artful sycophant of Richard II, and to gratify his own avarice and ambition, deluded his sovereign into those errors which soon terminated in the ruin of both. And Robertson includes a footnote here which tells us, for opposing the despotic measures of Richard II, the Earl of Warwick was condemned to perpetual imprisonment in this island. And as we know, the largest tower in the wall of Peel Castle is known as the Warwick Tower, and it's where the Earl of Warwick was said to have been held prisoner in 1397. Strawberry Leaves, Delio Sevi. That's the subject of this song by Cornish band The Changing Room.
There's a wheel mosmo is flu that take Gans agus met is gwyn agus blue melin
Mi haven most en benten Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
Alla vi mos gen a wheel mo is flu that take Gans agus met is gwyn agus blue melin
Rook ma minne quiz Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
Fatal vet ma gravi agus gor a wheel do Gans agus met is gwyn agus blue melin
Mi haven Sevillata Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
Gravi agus 3 weekends vlog Kan dagens wedjes gwyn agus blue melin
Mi haven ni don Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
Byw a fin o chwig a fod fracsiwn agus vlog Kan dagens wedjes gwyn agus blue melin
Chwi a fethi Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
There's a wheel mosmo is blue that take Kan dagens wedjes gwyn agus blue melin
Mi haven most en benten Sarah Wig Recdelio Sevilla mo easy take
Ragdelio Sevilla mo easy take
A young maiden with her white face and yellow hair, off to pick the strawberry leaves, Delio Sebi of the title that makes the maidens fair, and that was Cornish band The Changing Room. Richard II is thought by some to have been suffering from, well, a personality disorder, perhaps mental illness, which with his belief in his divine right as king led him eventually into what was called the tyranny. Richard's fate, says David Robertson, is well known. Well, that's all right if you know it, I suppose. He was deposed in 1399, and Henry Bolingbroke became Henry IV. Henry Bolingbroke was born at Bolingbroke Castle in Lincolnshire. That's why he was called Bolingbroke. Richard II was left to starve to death in Pontefract Castle. His body was later brought to London and exhibited in St Paul's Cathedral, and was subsequently buried at King's Langley Priory in Hertfordshire. However, in Scotland there were rumours that he was still alive, and a person was kept and shown off as Richard II, and he lived on until 1419, being a rallying point for people who saw Henry Bolingbroke as nothing but a usurper. However, we're straying away from Manx history, although as we've seen, David Robertson's version of events has been a bit fanciful or confused here, though correct in saying that Scroop, on Henry's assumption of the crown of England, was beheaded, and that was without trial in Bristol Castle. Gau a chibin seo ons de lau chiair, as Van Helsing, Erlú de chor a rin skinne chrí, as an ord sa lau yeshed. Eis, tret a shingen gol toiacht a fager ein son na meriw, nim blai machi, tan jorem on seo as nina firelia gair torm, gin bula ons enem ye, de vod uliu ve de mai lish a varu as de grai ein oru, as de gin na nyau veriw parthail. Gau Arthur a chibbin as an ord, as geleers van aid nieg a courage argentus, geren na lauwen eg a cray na eer breppel. Doshel Van Helsing a lior erin ege, as gau e toiach der liai mach, as ren Quincy as Mhic Iarla gemai as dodgen. Hug Arthur a rin skin chrí, as gouds van mi gin, dat mi fagen an liag sa veel vein. Eis, renny bula leis uljuanjaart, rennen rid sa choffin luba, as henk skreg at je mag skach ac skin muchin as na melen jurge forslich. piper Pete Brown taking us round the lighthouse, and there we could see the swallow's tail.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Siod yw stasiwn na nasiwn radio fanning, nas yw geisdiach rys Claare na Gael ag y tre tong. Mish Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Have I heard tell of old Bobby Bob?
Ren na corp, cray as cather, ons cummach and kai. Ren na fieglan ben a givach, snaggerach ruchelia, der na van a mailen garage, as van beal cronich les kesh crimson. Ach ren Arthur Tushem, ach ren Arthur Tushem ach orer bi. Yiche gurish cumma Thor, chaus ren a raiegel, gin cray, iri as Tushem, sign as stuna, a chibin vichinach. Chaus ren a fool vain chri skaltich, troggle nis, a spry soos magit de mooi. Van edin eg a sight, as fe jean der au churm sai shane na truj. Hug and rear J. Dunnelus dun, the round the Corena and Jean the woolly the bing through the tie merry beg. As esh, Henk Luba as Cray na Kerpe the vein a slew, as ren the Fiegland square by Snaggerach, as an Edin by cry. Vejere, vein a lie gin leeltes, van over aglach gint as herish. Hutjen or by Lau Arthur. Renny snapperel, as dobber they tushim by the wrenchen goile. Ren binen moere de olish, dare to mak wijn wijshegge, as we tarn ennel les skredden brish. Now we've got rid of William Scroop, or at least Henry IV has got rid of William the Scroop's head, and, says Robertson, the Isle of Man was then granted by that monarch to Percy, Earl of Northumberland, and his heirs, on condition that they should carry on their left shoulder at the coronation of the English monarchs the sword with which Henry was girt when he entered England. To the power and influence of Percy, Henry was considerably indebted for the crown he had assumed. His services merited the gratitude of the king, but the honours he obtained, being either inferior to his merit or ambition, he boldly attempted to shake the throne which he had so zealously contributed to establish. The vigilance and policy of Henry frustrated his perfidy, while the just resentment of the monarch deprived him of this ample domain, and so he lost the lordship of Man. Well, not that I've heard one for some years, I'm afraid, but this is a Welsh song about the little cuckoo, or Gucwach, sung here by Cerys Matthews.
Gucwach yn dwytyn ffôlog, faldir aldi rai taito, canim ddiser eisen pigog, faldir aldi rai taito. Dos I blwydd o'r gelle derion, faldir aldi rai taito. Ti geian o lwyn I gwrddion, faldir aldi rai taito. Gucwach hed yn union, faldir aldi rai taito. Ti a glanna iafon union, faldir aldi rai taito. Arde naros enid, faldir aldi rai taito. Wrth anes lefe anwylid, faldir aldi rai taito. Gucwach o synog weli, faldir aldi rai taito. Una wylar dŵr yn heli, faldir aldi rai taito. Candi gan y gwanwyn iddo, faldir aldi rai taito. Can o obaith i'w gysuro, faldir aldi rai taito.
Cerys Matthews, you may remember her from Catatonia, and she's very often on Channel Pedwar Ec, explaining about the background of ballads in the Welsh language. But there she was singing about a cuckoo fach, the little cuckoo. And the last time I heard a cuckoo and thought I saw one was in Garwick one summer, and, well, that's a good few years ago now, I'm afraid. Fe the jar o a chofreis aglach ersen. As manna rawe vai eignit de chulina corum lorish na smoo na cushion den joil, hanodach riw ang oil ons lawe. Rish minute na re, was in chwish courage desen, na renshin gin a choffin. Ach tre renshin. Hai cronen de yin de smoostich vain der jed and jay eliagin. Renshin bleche cho gin, de ren Arthur Erie, an oder rawe na hai a lair, as henke, as jiche nis. As esh, ren seilsje bogoil njauchadjin, brisje stjachsen edinegge, as ren immen na schul de bollach, gromid je skoch van a laiori. On shen, ze choffin, geround the line a soldier, and rid agi as va chwish by ein rosh, as was in a dit de chor dewey day, de rowen over the stroy by courage, maar chid and as van care smoeg de yunaway. Ach, Lucy, maar rushin wageni chouds wie bio, lesh miljage as glenage and edinek, gin casola. Well, now, how's your feet? Scottish band Malinky are inviting us now to pad the road with me. Oh, in fact, they're not. We're getting a bit of snag kiaull gelby. As Mhic we shen ped a cubbly we Claare and fedden as we Thomas CALLISTER Claare the strengen and version shen snankjol helby wat greirish as we and podden kjoli arach. I must have put Malinky in the wrong order there, so apologies for that. I'll play that next time. Pad the Road with Me by Malinky. We'll come back to that. Sfeerwee de rauw, waar was je een nagenad, trevi bio, na monnichen de gereel is de vieren is de gribbe. Ach, smien dan wat sjolju. No der ouwed kourige maag, a firnje zegt, en wen as we ennainuri. Now the Percys of Northumberland tried to wrest power from where they'd helped to place it, in the hands of Henry Bolingbroke, Henry IV. But their efforts were in vain, and as a result they lost the kingship of Man which Henry IV had bestowed on them. And so we return to David Robertson. The Isle of Man, Robertson tells us, was then, in the 6th year of the same reign, conferred on Sir John Stanley for life. So yes, we've reached the House of Stanley now. Shananish and Traer jet the Chorkeon a Clairish. Chris Pearson is up next with 2 hours of music to chill out to this Sunday evening between 7 and 9. And then at 9 it's Judith Leigh here with Sundown. We close with more music from the new album by Breton band FORZH PENAOS, released at the start of this year. It's an album which is called Rock, which gives a clue to the way they perform what is essentially Breton dance music. In this case, a gavotte ton double, which is called Ecstasia. I wonder if that's a reference to Anastasia, one of Achwarazed Gwadeg, the Gwadeg sisters from Brésil. Now, whether or no, we're certainly closing with FORZH PENAOS and the tune which is called Ecstasia. As Masordera Nachirtesh Teorin Irias Golnish. And so until the next time, this is Robert Cadine Carswell, Robert de Carslach.
Old Bobby Bob.
Wishing you a very good night. Eve, I'm a Crieru, as Orserlier, as my Yirian Schedule you.